March 4, 1995. Inside the Kimmen restaurant in New Orleans' quiet Gentilly neighborhood, the night was winding down. Steam rose from freshly washed dishes, chairs were stacked, and the air still carried the warm scent of soy and garlic. It was just after 1 a.m., and the Vu family was preparing to lock up for the night. Hao Vu and her brother, Kwong, moved quietly behind the counter, wrapping up another long shift. Near the entrance, Officer Ronald Williams, too, a 25-year-old New Orleans cop working a side job as security, kept a watchful eye. It was supposed to be a routine night, nothing out of the ordinary. Outside, the rain began to fall in soft, steady sheets. Then suddenly chaos. Gunfire cracked through the stillness, sharp and deafening, bouncing off the tiled walls. In seconds, everything changed. Officer down. Officer down at Kimmen restaurant, blared through the radio. When first responders arrived, what they saw was pure horror. 3 people lay dead, executed in cold blood. Among them was Officer Williams, still in uniform, his service weapon untouched, holstered at his side. He never had a chance. And the killer, she hadn't run far. In fact, she had come back calm, collected, and still wearing her badge. The same badge as the man now lying in a pool of his own blood. Her name was Antoinette Frank, a New Orleans police officer, a woman sworn to protect and now the prime suspect in a crime that would shatter the city's already fragile trust. Frank wasn't a stranger to the restaurant. She'd been a regular there, eating with the Vu family, sharing jokes, and learning every inch of the place, the layout, the cameras, even which doors creaked. That familiarity made her betrayal feel monstrous. She had laughed with them, dined with them, and then turned on them in the most brutal way imaginable. Behind her uniform, Antoinette Frank was hiding something dark. Her badge might have gleamed, but beneath it was a storm of instability, desperation, and cold-blooded intent that no one, not even her fellow officers, saw coming. This wasn't a mistaken shooting. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was an execution plan, deliberate and dripping with greed. As word of the triple homicide spread, outrage swept across New Orleans like wildfire. Headlines screamed betrayal. The public demanded to know how someone trusted to uphold the law could become a killer. Frank's arrest became one of the darkest stains in an OPD history. But as investigators dug deeper, it was clear the warning signs had always been there. Psychological red flags ignored, a broken system too desperate to fill uniforms to see the danger hiding in plain sight. And now, 3 families were left grieving, burying their loved ones because the system had failed. This wasn't just another crime in a city already drowning in bloodshed. It was far worse because this time, evil had come from within the very institution meant to stop it. But the horror didn't end there. Investigators soon uncovered something even more chilling. Frank was also believed to have killed her own father, Adam Frank, a man accused of repeatedly raping her as a child. Just a month after she was sentenced to death, police made a shocking discovery: a human skull with a bullet hole buried beneath her home. Adam Frank had been staying with his daughter shortly before she reported him missing in 1993. This is the story of Antoinette Frank, a cop-turned-killer. Born April 30, 1971, in Louisiana, Antoinette Renee Frank grew up as the only daughter in a house where silence lingered longer than laughter. Her father, a military veteran, suffered from what many believed to be untreated mental illness. He was controlling, unpredictable, and often paranoid. For young Antoinette, home was not a haven, it was a prison of fear and confusion. Neighbors later remembered her as a quiet, withdrawn girl, always craving approval and attention. She idolized authority figures, drawn to the order and power they represented. To her, the police uniform wasn't just clothing, it was everything she never had: structure, respect, and purpose. As she grew older, that craving for validation would lead her down a path no one could have imagined, and one that New Orleans would never forget. Antoinette's ambition roared louder than her doubts. She didn't just want the badge for honor, she wanted control, power, and a sense of belonging she'd never had. In 1991, She applied to join the New Orleans Police Department. But her journey to the badge was anything but smooth. Twice she failed her psychological evaluations. One examiner bluntly noted she was emotionally unstable and unfit for the brutal stress of police work. Her academic scores were average at best. She struggled with weapons handling, situational awareness, and even basic field tactics. Yet somehow, despite all those red flags, Antoinette Frank was hired in early 1993. At that time, the department was drowning in violent crime and desperate to fill empty positions. Standards were lowered, warnings ignored. Frank didn't earn her spot because she was exceptional. She got it because the system was desperate. Assigned to the 5th District, she immediately stood out, but not for good reasons. Fellow officers called her awkward, distant, and withdrawn. She kept to herself, avoided small talk, and often looked nervous during patrols. Still, no one thought she was dangerous. Not yet. Meanwhile, another young recruit was rising fast. Officer Ronald Williams, too. Just 25. He was the kind of cop the department needed. Sharp, dedicated, and genuinely caring. He believed in what the badge represented and worked tirelessly to make a difference. To support his family, Williams took on extra shifts as a security guard at a local Vietnamese restaurant called Kim An. The Vu family, who owned Kim An, had fled war-torn Vietnam to build a new life in New Orleans. Through long hours and unshakable determination, they turned their small restaurant into a community hub. Ha and Quang Vu, two of the siblings who ran it, were known for their warmth and generosity. Regulars weren't just customers, they were family. And among those regulars was Officer Antoinette Frank. Frank often dropped by in uniform, sometimes to eat, sometimes just to chat. The Vu family welcomed her like one of their own. They trusted her so completely that they even gave her access to restricted parts of the restaurant reserved for staff. She wasn't just a customer anymore, she was a friend, a protector. But behind that friendly smile and polished badge, something dark was beginning to stir. Around this time, Frank began a secret relationship with an 18-year-old named Rogers Lacaz. He already had a criminal record and was rumored to have ties to local gangs. Their relationship was strange, reckless, and dangerous, a cop and a felon. They kept it quiet, but those close to Frank started noticing a change. She became distant, unpredictable, and secretive. Soon, she was spotted in areas far outside her assigned patrol zone, often with Lacaz in tow. Her behavior grew bolder and riskier. She started using her badge to bend the rules, running unauthorized license plate checks, granting favors, and skirting department protocols. It was a slow unraveling, but few noticed how far she was slipping. The cracks were there, hidden behind that uniform. Then came the night that changed everything. Just past 1 a.m. on March 4, 1995, the Kim An restaurant, located in a quiet strip along Chef Men to a highway, was closing up after another long day. Inside, Ha Vu and her brother Quang followed their usual closing routine. Leftovers packed, dishes cleaned, chairs flipped onto tables. It felt like any other night, but it would end in unthinkable tragedy. For years, it had been routine. In the quiet dining area, Officer Ronald Williams stood watch once again. Though off duty from his NOPD patrol, he worked extra shifts guarding the Vu family, a familiar duty he took seriously. He'd grown close to them over time, a trusted guardian ensuring their safety. But what no one realized that night was that death was already closing in on their doorstep. Antoinette Frank held a key to the restaurant. Not long after closing, she arrived dressed in civilian clothes, calm and confident. She told the staff she just needed to use the restroom, and why would anyone question her? She was one of them, a police officer, a friend. Moments later, the door opened again, and in stepped Rogers Lacaz. He wasn't family, wasn't a friend, and he definitely wasn't supposed to be there. Before anyone could react, the nightmare had already begun. Lacaz came armed with a MEC-10 semi-automatic pistol, small, deadly, and built for chaos. Frank followed right behind him, the two moving with chilling purpose. They barked orders, demanding cash, forcing Ha, Kwong, their sister Cho, toward the back of the restaurant. Terrified, the Wu siblings were herded into the walk-in cooler, metal tomb packed with shelves of food and the cold smell of fear. The gun never wavered as they were shoved inside, trapped in that freezing darkness. Meanwhile, Officer Williams heard the commotion. Trained, alert, and brave, he moved toward the sound, ready to protect those he swore to keep safe. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. As he rounded the corner, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the air, striking him from behind. Forensics would later confirm that Rogers Lacaz fired the shots, but Frank was only a few feet away, close enough to see it all, maybe even to approve it. Williams collapsed instantly, fatally wounded, his gun still holstered. They had ambushed him before he even had the chance to draw his weapon. Yet the horror wasn't over. With Williams down, Antoinette Frank turned back toward the cooler. One by one, she pulled the Wu siblings out, not to save them, but to silence them forever. First, Ha Wu, then Kwong. Each was executed, shot point blank in the head. No warning, no mercy. Just the echo of gunfire bouncing off cold tile and steel. The restaurant fell deathly silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, until another sound broke through, the trembling breath of Xiaowu, the youngest sister, who was still alive. Unseen, she hid deeper inside the cooler's shadows, frozen in place as the horror unfolded. She heard every scream, every gunshot, every whisper. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it might give her away. When the killers finally left, she didn't move for minutes that felt like hours, clinging to life in the dark. But Frank's night of betrayal wasn't over yet. What began as a robbery had turned into one of the most shocking acts of treachery in New Orleans police history. When detectives arrived, they could feel something was terribly off. And who was among the first to return to the scene? Antoinette Frank herself. Now, wearing her full uniform, she played the part of a concerned officer, feigning shock and sympathy. But her act didn't fool everyone. She'd shown up too fast, almost as if she already knew what had happened. While her colleagues solemnly worked the crime scene, Frank lingered nearby, asking pointless questions, inserting herself into the investigation. Her presence didn't feel helpful. It felt like a distraction. Then, out of the blood-slit back room, movement. A survivor emerged, shaking, ghost pale, barely able to stand. It was Xiaowu. Hidden in that freezing cooler for nearly an hour, she had witnessed every horrifying detail. Her voice quivered as she spoke, but her words cut through the air like a blade. She said she saw Antoinette Frank. She said she saw her pull the trigger. And in that moment, everything changed forever. Everything changed. Frank wasn't just a suspicious officer, she was now a suspect. Investigators immediately zeroed in on her whereabouts during the time of the murders. They discovered she had left her patrol area without authorization, offering no credible explanation for where she had been. Her story shifted under questioning. Timelines wavered, details blurred. Meanwhile, forensic teams began piecing together the chaotic scene. Officer Ronald Williams' body was found near the entrance, riddled with multiple gunshot wounds to the back. His service weapon remained holstered. He never had a chance to defend himself. Inside, in pools of blood, Lei Ho and Kwong Wu, each executed with single shots to the head at close range. Shell casings were collected, blood spatter analyzed. Ballistic tests rushed through the NOPD lab. The results were damning. The bullets that killed Williams matched Frank's department-issued 9mm pistol. That weapon, recovered later, had been wiped clean. Not a single fingerprint remained, not even Frank's. Suspicion soared. Another gun, a compact MAC-10, was traced to Rogers Lacaz, notorious for its rapid-fire lethality. Xiaowu's description matched the weapon perfectly. Fingerprints confirmed Lacaz's connection. Suddenly, two suspects emerged, a police officer and a teenage gunman. Detectives dug deeper and uncovered a secret relationship between Frank and Lacaz. They'd been romantically involved for months, hidden from the department, but spotted by civilians in neighborhoods far beyond Frank's patrol zone. The dots connected quickly. The two had visited Kimmon repeatedly before the murders. Frank had keys, knew the layout, understood the family's routines. This wasn't a spontaneous crime, it was premeditated and practiced. Frank's personal life painted a troubling picture. Financial strain, mounting debt, payday loans, and a long-standing pattern of borrowing money emerged. Her mental health had been flagged during police academy assessments years earlier, concerns dismissed due to understaffing and department pressures. Lacaz, barely 18, had a violent past, gang involvement, assaults, and a history of carrying firearms. Investigators now saw the motive clearly. Fast cash and a clean getaway, shielded by Frank's badge. But their plan crumbled quickly. Frank was brought in for formal questioning. She denied everything. She claimed she had stopped by the restaurant by coincidence, knew nothing of what happened, insisted Lacaz wasn't involved, and swore the gun wasn't hers. Detectives pressed harder. Why did she leave her patrol zone? Why was her weapon wiped clean? Why did the surviving victim say she saw her pull the trigger? Frank became evasive, answers short, tone cold. Lacaz remained silent, but his silence screamed volumes. Evidence kept mounting. Surveillance placed their car near Kimmon that night. Witnesses saw them together hours earlier, and one even alleged Lacaz had shown off the MAC-10 days before. By late afternoon on March 4th, both Frank and Lacaz were arrested. The NOPD couldn't issue a press release. Shock had frozen the department. One of their own was in handcuffs, accused of murdering a fellow officer and slaughtering civilians she had sworn to protect. Families were devastated, reputations shattered. The department's credibility crumbled. In the evidence locker, two weapons told the story. The MAC-10 and Frank's 9mm forensics was clear, and Jovu's testimony sealed it. A young woman who had lost almost everything faced the killer and maimed her. The case was airtight. But detectives couldn't shake the haunting truth. The betrayal came from behind the badge. How many red flags had been missed? How many warnings ignored? How does a protector become a predator? And who do you trust when the killer wears a uniform? In the spring of 1995, Courtroom 7C in Orleans Parish became the stage for a trial gripping New Orleans and disturbing the nation. At its center, Antoinette Frank, once a police officer herself, now a defendant charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The state's case was swift, damning, and unrelenting. Frank entered the courtroom stoic, blank-faced, seemingly disconnected from the horror she'd caused. Meanwhile, victims' families felt every ounce of pain. The Vu family mourned Ho and Kwong. Uniformed officers honored their fallen brother, Ronald Williams, too. The prosecution methodically reconstructed the night at Kimmon, presenting ballistic evidence, forensic reports, and timelines built from witnesses and physical proof. Every fact pointed to Frank and Lacaz, but it wasn't just forensics that shook the courtroom, it was Jovu. She took the stand, trembling, swearing to tell the truth. Her soft voice pierced the room as she recounted watching her siblings be executed, recognizing Frank not just by face, but by voice and mannerisms. This was no masked intruder, it was someone they trusted, someone who dined at their table. Jovu described hiding in the walk-in cooler, hearing her siblings' final moments. Her words silenced the courtroom, leaving even the defense unable to shake her. The facts spoke, the human cost spoke louder. The defense tried to argue manipulation, instability, clouded judgment, but jurors saw through it. The motive was clear, the evidence overwhelming, the role direct. Deliberation lasted only 22 minutes. Verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed immediately, with the prosecution seeking the death penalty due to calculated murders, abuse of public trust, and execution of a fellow officer. Frank showed no visible reaction. On September 12, 1995, She was sentenced to death by lethal injection, the first woman in modern Louisiana history to receive such a sentence, and one of the rare female officers in U.S. history convicted of killing a fellow officer. Lacaz was tried separately. His case mirrored Frank's. Witnesses testified to his role as the gunman. Ballistics matched, fingerprints on the MAC-10, and Chovu again testified. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but later, the Louisiana Supreme Court overturned his sentence due to juror issues. In 2017, Lacaz's sentence was reduced to life without parole. Frank, however, remains on death row at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women in St. Gabriel, spending most days in isolation. Her appeals for ineffective counsel and procedural errors have all been denied. Her name has faded from headlines, yet she remains an anomaly, a former cop, a convicted killer, and the only woman in Louisiana on death row. As of 2025, she is the only former law enforcement officer in the U.S. awaiting execution. A woman once trusted with a badge now reduced to a number. Her cell is small. Her world steel doors, fluorescent lights, and scheduled meals. She no longer wears blue, carries a gun, or commands trust for the families. It will never be enough. Ronald A. Williams, who was just 25, father, son, friend, officer who believed in duty and the fragile line between order and chaos. He died on that line, unarmed, ambushed, betrayed by someone wearing the same badge. Hoa and Quang Vu were survivors who fled Vietnam with hopes for a better life. Kim wasn't just a restaurant, it was a dream, now violently shattered. And their killer, Frank, exploited trust and authority, weaponizing public faith to destroy lives. Her story forces us to ask, how do we vet those entrusted with deadly power? How do we hold institutions accountable, not just after crimes, but before the unthinkable occurs? The law imposed a sentence, but the families, the city, and every honorable officer feel wounds that never heal. This wasn't only about 3 lives, it was a system tested and found lacking. Frank remains on death row. Appeals failed. Her cell is her world. Her name a permanent stain on the department she once served. But the questions linger. Was justice truly served? Or did the system fail before the first shot? Comment below with your thoughts. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to follow more deep dive true crime stories. Because behind every headline lies a deeper truth, and we're here to uncover it.